and welcome to Superintendents Roundtable. I'm Deborah Vinsel. Periodically, we invite the superintendents from our 4 large school districts to come talk about education in our community. I'm pleased to have with us again, as usual, our 4 superintendents from Olympia, North Thurston, Yelm, and Tumwater. And I'm going to start in the middle. We're doing things a tad differently today to introduce to you a new member of the Roundtable, John Bash. But John is not new to education in our community because he came to Tumwater Schools from North Thurston. So John, I just want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and share a little bit about your background. And welcome to the Roundtable.
Well, thank you very much, and we appreciate the opportunity to come and visit about the exciting things going on in schools. A little bit about me. Thurston County is really home for me, and I was honored and humbled to be selected as the Tumwater Superintendent last March after serving 5 years with my friend Raj in North Thurston. And prior to that, I spent 15 years in Lewis County with the Olympia School District. But prior to that, I was here and actually started my career in Shelton for a year, but then as a teacher in the Olympia School District, where I also graduated from high school. And so I've made my way through at least 3 of the 4 here at the table. And one thing I really appreciate about my partners here is in Thurston County we have a unique collaborative culture that we truly work together, and this is yet another example of that coming here. The exciting thing about Tumwater for me is, like all these communities, a really strong component of community support for the schools, and in Tumwater a long history of that. And so I'm excited to join the Tumwater system, but also delighted to still be part of this great group of educators here in Thurston County.
Well, we're glad to have you at the Roundtable. Also joining us again is Raj Manhas from the North Thurston Public Schools, Andy Wolf from Yelm Community Schools, and Dick Cvitanich from the Olympia School District. So welcome, gentlemen. I know your schedules are busy. We're so glad to have you. So let's talk a little bit about, it's the beginning of school. We're 6 weeks into the school year, which is a little bit amazing. Where did September go? And so, Dick, let's start on your end of the table. How'd the school year get off in the district?
We are off to a really great start this year. Our enrollment was up about 267 students. I say about, that's how closely we follow it, actually. So we're happy about that. We greeted a wide group of new staff to meet the needs of the classrooms. It's been a challenge in some ways, but we've been able to staff our classrooms, and I think it's a future challenge for us as we move forward. We were thrilled with our students' performance on the SBAC, actually very, very excited, and very pleased with our graduation rate, the kinds of data that came back from last year. We're very, very happy. And we have been busy. We just finished the last of our curriculum nights last night at LP Brown and had a big turnout of parents. And I just think that we have primarily focused on maintaining the good things that we have going in our school district, and we put an added focus for safety this year. We spent quite a bit of time at our August retreat with principals and have done some work in our schools this fall around safety.
Yeah, so we'll talk, I hope maybe we'll have a moment just to touch on safety too a little bit later on, but I did want to ask, the 267 student population increase, was that what you were expecting? Was it more than you expected, less than you expected?
We came in about 28 students above what we budgeted, so we're pretty happy with hitting the mark.
Great, great. Andy, how's it going in Yelm?
We're off to a great start. Yelm's a very special place, as you know, and it was another good year. Great things happening out there. Our enrollment continues to grow, and that's been a theme for us since 2003. And currently, we're about 860 students over our capacity at school, so it's kind of a troublesome when we grow by another 100 students plus this year. We're projected to be on
across the board.
Yeah, and we're projected to be another 900 by 2020. So we're about 1,700 students. So we're looking at some of those things. One of the things, like Dick, we had to hire teachers, and this year there was a teacher shortage around the state, and I think a lot of that caused by some of the good work that was done by the legislature to fund kindergarten and some of those things that I'm sure we'll talk about. So there's more demand for teachers. So we do have We are out of classrooms, but we have some unhoused teachers that are actually partnering now in classrooms to help in that situation in Yelm. But great stuff happening at our high school. Brian Wharton and his crew this year had a leadership summit for our high school students. 175 students were invited. They came in from all walks of our campus there. You know, it was a great event in August, in that students sat there and they were leaders in the drama or the athletics or CTE, but they never really had talked. And so they got this, they didn't know each other because those circles, they can get kind of, isolated. They've already had 9 impactful projects that they've done or events since the start of school. And so, we are a one high school town and a very big high school, but that leads a little bit of the whole district. And so we're very excited about what's happening out there. Got some great news. One of the exciting things was our teaching and learning just got a grant from the Department of Defense for $750,000 for early literacy in our elementaries, and also to help with our digital learning. And so our elementaries will be 1-to-1 in Chromebooks. And so we've got a lot of great things happening. It's just a very exciting time in Yelm and very positive about what's going on. So
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, John, how did Tumwater get off this year?
Smooth start, and one that I would say really was around a theme of Tumwater Cares, which began in the summer. And for the first time ever, we hosted a sports, physical, and immunization clinic at Tumwater Middle School, and we had over 200 students served who otherwise would not have been able to participate in activities here this fall, especially athletics, without the physical, because getting into a doctor, if you haven't made the appointment, can take some time. So we were delighted to kick that off and have such a great response from our students and families. In addition, for years, Tumwater has hosted a backpack program, and we stuffed over 700 backpacks with school supplies for our needy kids and families, so they walk through the door the first day prepared. Likewise, with the districts joining me here today, the Little Red Schoolhouse program hosted in North Thurston this year, we had several families from Tumwater participate in that. And so when we talk about Tumwater Cares, we really want every kid to come through the doors prepared. On the enrollment side, Tumwater has a history of what I'll call stability, meaning very few dramatic drops or increases. And this year we have 23 more students. So again, pretty stable, but we did have to add quite a few staff members because 4 of our 6 elementary schools now host state-funded all-day kindergarten.
Right.
And we're delighted to be able to offer that. And our other schools are still offering a tuition-based all-day option, but next year we're excited to be able to provide universal all-day K with full state funding.
Great.
And again, we're off to a great start. Obviously, I'm new, and I was delighted to hire Chris Woods, former Capitol High School principal, to serve as our Executive Director of Student Learning. So the other new thing is building a leadership culture, and our focus this year with our leaders is on building strong relationships within the district and with our students, parents, and community.
Great. Well, congratulations.
Well,
Gosh.
we also had a very smooth start, and we have grown regularly, quite a bit over the years. We have 200 some more students this year, and we planned it that way, but a little less than that because we have been doing a little more conservative sort of planning because sometimes there are some dips. So that went well, and I believe that the systems and structures we have been building for quite some time, being a large system, are being such a smooth start. And especially this year we have every child, kindergarten child, in every school without any tuition. So we added, some supporting some of those kids which were tuition-based, because we did provide full-day kindergarten in all schools, but they were not all free. And also, for some kids who we were subsidizing, we couldn't afford, more than what we were doing. So that's a major thing. And during summer, I would say that another major stride we made was we added 300-400 more students to our summer program in different areas, like middle school and third grade reading and credit recovery, retrieval kind of work we have been doing. So strong summer program. And we started at River Ridge, a brand new STEM academy, worked very hard on that. And Mr. Bash had a lot to do with a lot of these things I'm taking credit for right now. But construction work and everything, major construction going on right now in our system, we'll touch a little bit later. But I believe that in general, I would say, already Dick said a little bit there, I asked our data person to look at our state. How did we compare against some of the other states? Now, first time, we has the national standards and the testing. So those states, 8 or 9 she looked at, worse, they have the same test. We as a state did really, really well. We are at the top, pretty much. And then on top of that, when we look at our region here, we generally perform better than the state, given our demographics, especially in our system, for us to be performing at that level. I think this is something our community needs to know, that our teachers are doing amazing work, our principals, our whole administration, and the community support. So it's really impressive. So we had a very good start, a lot of good work going on, and we are very pleased with the progress made.
Great.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little, you've all touched on early learning in your opening comments, or all-day kindergarten or tuition, so I'm going to jump to that topic. So let's talk about that. I know that in all of your districts is there all-day kindergarten in Yelm? But not in all schools, not universally. So why is it a good thing to have all-day kindergarten? It's new for some folks. It's not, it's been around for others. And do you want to take that? Sure. Yeah.
We're kind of the poster child for all-day kindergarten because Yelm started in 2000. So we've fully funded it out of our district funds, and we've been having all-day kindergarten since then in all schools.
And
so
it's
all
not
students,
tuition-based.
And it's not tuition-based.
Funded.
So we fully funded it through basically it started out with I-728 funds and then went to local dollars that had to be utilized for that. We realized the benefit of all-day kindergarten immediately, and the fact, obviously, that the more students are reading, writing, doing those things, their performance is going to grow. And we have seen that drastically improve what we can do with students. And what districts will find, and I'm sure they will echo this, is that our kindergartners at the end of that kindergarten year look a lot more like end-of-year first graders used to look like. When you walk in there in the spring, they're writing full sentences, they're reading, and so it's very powerful in that sense. The other thing that we've found is that it just really gives a stable environment. I think that there's something to said. There's a lot of families that have mom and dad both work now. There's not a traditional parent that can stay home, and so we know that having kids get into a routine, a schedule, coming there, a breakfast, lunch, those types of things. In some cases, that's the meals that those kids would have in some of our poverty homes. So we believe it's just been really an influential and positive thing for all of our schools, and allows us to really have a really great connection with the parents early. Kindergarten parents are much more motivated to get involved with schools. And so when you can get that partnership with them, then we've seen that grow now since we've been doing this since 2000. We're well into this, 16 years, 15 years later. And we see that carrying that consistency through to our graduating classes. Now, one of the funny things about Yelm is that because we have a large military population, so we have a lot of in and out, as far as 4 years with students and then gone. But those students in our system, the data will show that our all-day kindergartners have a higher graduation rate. They do really well at the end of the year. Last year, I think all 4 of our valedictorians were kids that came through our system that were all-day kids and actually from one school, and I think there was a guy there, I named Andy Wolf, that was their principal in there, but we won't mention that anyway. It's just been a really positive thing, and I think that it's something that really needs to be looked at. The stressors are, sometimes little kids aren't really ready for that full day, and so you do have to transition them and be very careful about how you do that and how you bring them along. So those first months, it's really learning how to deal with a young person and getting them engaged and bringing them along. And that partnership piece is really going to do it. I know these folks have already been well informed of that and understand that. But no, this was a great move by the legislature to really do that. And I look forward to when all students have access to it.
Yeah. So I'm going to go that way. Dick, what's the status of half-day versus all-day in the Olympia District?
We've had full-day kindergarten, not in every school for quite some time. It has been free to families in our Title I eligible schools, and we've had a tuition-based. And right now we have 2 half-day kindergartens left in the school district. Some of our parents prefer a half day. They feel that they can offer some things to their children outside of the half day that the schools can't. But I would say that my experience, the fundamental difference between the two is that in the past with a half-day kindergarten, there's a lot of socialization in kindergarten. You're learning how to get along with others, to essentially play in the sandbox, and we teach as well. And I think what we see with the full-day kindergartners, and Andy alluded to it, is that they look more like first graders. More time allows that opportunity to sort of learn how to play together and collaborate and cooperate. But now we have the academic piece just more strongly taught. You have more time, and that's what students that age need. So we're very pleased that we're able to offer that to our students, and I agree with Andy that it was a great move by the legislature. Mm-hmm. The research across the nation is, sketchy. It depends on where you come from and your demographic, and what they're seeing nationally over time is that the advantage for students in terms of literacy and math skills tends to disappear by third grade unless you're continuing to push those students. So we have a responsibility for these kids who come through full-day kindergarten in first grade to continue to ratchet up the academics.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, you said, when do you anticipate having full-day kindergarten?
That'll be statewide next year.
Next year, okay, mm-hmm. Okay, so everybody's going to be full.
Yes.
So, John, you mentioned that you're going to be bringing it on.
Right.
Full day across the district.
The remaining two schools
mm-hmm.
next year, and I would add two things. One is just to reinforce what Andy and Dick have said about teaching the whole child. I think if kindergarten teachers were here, they would tell you with 5-year-olds especially that what a full day offers you is additional time, obviously, to engage kids in those things that aren't reading, writing, and math versus a half-day teacher who's feeling more urgency than ever to focus on
the academics
because they feel accountable as well. And so it's the right decision. We'll get to funding later because that's a challenge attached to all this. So there's some good news and some challenging news built into this initiative. And then finally, I just want to give a shout out to kindergarten teachers because of what Andy said, and that is the beginning of kindergarten, the beginning of a kindergarten school year, always reveals a few kids who've never been in preschool,
right,
who have had very little or no socialization opportunities with other groups of kids in a formal way, and they're learning to do school. And so kindergarten teachers would tell you in any given classroom they have kids all across the spectrum in terms of what their needs are. It's a very challenging role, and so I really admire people who take on the challenge of teaching kindergarten.
Raj?
And I think the part which John mentioned, this whole child, we have been focusing on that a lot. And I believe when kids come in earlier, it's a time for us to get them assimilated, socialization and all of that. In the long term, that does help, and even if academically, as Dick said, the data is not very clear, but I believe that is really good thing. The other thing I just want to quickly say that this last year, we also created a place where birth to 3 kids with special needs, where parents can come and we help them. And it's kind of early learning center, birth to 3. That was the first thing for us, and it's a good thing where we have some of our experts who can really help these people. But we are very pleased with the work so far.
Great. Earlier, some of you touched on student achievement and that we're at the new standards are in place, testing has gone by, but let's get into a little more detail about that. So, Raj, why don't I start with you, and why don't you share with us
I
how
would
things are
start
doing?
that we implemented a new Common Core based math curriculum 2-3 years ago, and we are seeing really great results out of that. Elementary, 4th, 5th, 6th, we did really well. And as I said, we are looking at data. Generally our demographics match with the states. Kind of poverty and everything else. So when we compare against the state, in some ways it's a good comparison. So when we are doing equal or better than the state, that sort of shows that we are kind of keeping up our performance. So most of those we have done very well. I think the area which we continue to sort of focus on, we need to do more work, is the middle school. We are okay, but I think we need to work more. And the other area which we really are focusing hard on right now is special need kids. I believe we as a state and we as school systems, we need to do a better job in supporting those kids, but our school system also is really taking that to heart. Science, we have always done well. I'm distancing ourselves from the state average, 7, 8, 10 points. It's really impressive. And our graduation rates, as Dick said earlier, they have been much better than the overall state and the national. So I'm very pleased with that, but that doesn't mean there's a lot more work to do. And one of the things I want to say, I think maybe we'll touch later, the changing sort of guidelines and expectations and what is needed for graduation, what is not needed. I think we as a state need to really get better at stabilizing and maybe even graduation requirements, which I'm learning. A lot of other states don't have that as a requirement for graduation. You know, we need as a state need to really talk about that. And now we know that we have done, first time we can compare that we have done better than, I believe, most of the states, you know, who are taking the same courses and same standards. So we are performing well, and again, it's tied with the performance on the financial support side, which some of these states are funded much better, but we are still performing equal or better than them as a state. That means it's an issue which we as a community, as a state, we need to talk about.
John, how about testing and results in your district?
Well, and I've been around long enough now to have been through multiple shifts
Right.
and standards, and
Yeah.
so I appreciate Raj bringing that up, because the other reality you experience is when the standards change and the testing changes to measure those standards, there's an immediate anxiety that sets in within the system, especially with our teachers. And so I was told coming into Tumwater that folks were a little nervous about the results, but really worked hard. And to our pleasant surprise, we did very well, which means the efforts that were begun to try and align our curriculum to the new standards years ago and continues is hitting the mark for the majority of our kids. But like Raj, we're never finished. And the thing I'm excited about in Tumwater is I'm hearing teachers, principals, and leaders embrace the 15 to 20% of our students who aren't quite there yet, and those kids really need to be our focus. I was most impressed when I took a look at our low-income students, because there still is a correlation between poverty and achievement. And so as we all attempt to close that achievement gap, I looked at Tumwater low-income students and their performance against the statewide data for low-income students, and the vast majority of the Tumwater low-income kids exceed the state performance for that same subgroup. So we're on the right track. We certainly haven't arrived. And so we need to celebrate that while also stepping up our efforts to really keep moving in the right direction.
Andy?
Yeah, one thing before I focus on Yelm, I think it needs to be said, Thurston County as a whole, not only the 4 big schools here, but the Rainiers, Rochester, they did very well on this exam. And I think it's a coalition of really strong teachers and purpose and practice and the instructional focus that we see in this region for our students. And so in most of these assessments when we came out, there was everybody predicted about a 35% pass rate across the board. And I will tell you that we are all well above that, and exceeded all state expectations across. I can speak for all my colleagues in the county and feel very strong with that. So, you know, kudos to the whole county and teachers and people who have done that work. And I think it's been a lot of groundwork that's been laid out to that. Specifically in Yelm, we're very excited. Traditionally, math has been an area of concern, still an area of concern. But the nice thing is that we're seeing steady incremental growth. And you cannot find fault when you have growth and people are continually looking to improve practice and instructional places there. Something that we see in all of our buildings. And I think that one of the things that we can be very critical about testing, and people will have all sorts of opinions about it, but it does give you, a barometer of what's happening, and it does give you a piece to grow from. And if you use it as a growth model and a mindset that we're going to get better, then I think it's safe. If we're using it as punitive, that I think we have to be really careful as we talk about data and as we go forward. That said, couldn't be happier with what's happening in Yelm. End of course exams are a big deal. Graduation requirements, we've seen a great piece there. Our graduation, our 5-year, we track a 5-year cohort because it's really important that we have an alternative school out there. So we're, 93% graduation rate. We're at the high, 89% in the rest. So we see some great things happening in Yelm, which is well above state average. I know that my colleagues here are in that same, we could all talk about great graduation rate. And it's a focus of our teachers. One area that will need to continue to get better across the state in our region is special needs students. And I think that the reason there is that a lot of times we weren't as standards-based, or we kind of taught to a piece there and didn't really look at a comparison there. Again, that can be dangerous because we need to take kids from where they are and take them to where they can be and grow them. But it has awoken in all of us a desire to do better in those arenas, and so I think that's happening. So really a big thumbs up, and again, I just want to say it regionally to all and the teachers in Yelm.
Right. Dick, do you have anything to add? Specific to Olympia, but just in general too.
Well, I believe that the SBAC assessment is a fair assessment, and I really appreciate the fact that there are many states doing it. We asked our staff, our expectation was that there was a difference between where Olympia students scored on the MSP and the state average, and we think we should be well above the state average. And my challenge was, let's at least be equal above the state average as we were on the MSP as we move into the SBAC. And I'm really happy to say that we improved. We stretched that distance. I'm not happy for the rest of the state. I'm pleased about the performance of our students because that distance between the state average went higher with the SBAC, which told me that we were doing the right things in our classrooms. Our teachers were working hard. Our kids were getting the right exposure. We exceeded the average in every category tested. Our middle schools, in fact, some of them didn't go down at all, the difference between the MSP and the SBAC. So we're really thrilled with our middle schools. As John mentioned, our Title I schools are considered to be the toughest challenge. Those exceeded the state averages in most categories, and I think that's something we're very, very proud of. Finally, the graduation rate, the national average has been hovering. It's started to creep up a little bit, but we've worked hard in that area with graduation specialists at our 2 comprehensive high schools, and I'm really happy to see that our 4-year graduation rate at Capital was 91% last year. At Olympia High School, it was 87%. And then if you couple the 5-year graduation rate, which I think is, I can't remember who mentioned, but it's really important. These are kids that do not quit. They come back, maybe different than it was 10 or 15 years ago, but they come back. So our graduation rate for 4-year, 5-year combined at Capital was 94%, and at Olympia High School is 92%. And I think you'd hear similar things across the board here, and so we're very proud of that.
It's impressive, definitely. So I would like just to clarify and my voice is leaving me all of a sudden, but we use a lot of acronyms at the table, so I do want to clarify for the viewers, SBAC stands for?
Smarter Balanced Assessment.
Okay, and the MS?
And the C is the consortium, but it's really SBA.
And the MSP?
Measurements of student progress.
Okay, so, and
old test, new test.
Old test, new test, right, and it's like, I still think in my head, it's all WASL, so right, it's like, and who knows what it'll be 5 years from now.
And I just want to add also to the comments made here, it's really remarkable that this area here, we work so well together. And yes, we have different demographics and different kind of student base, but performance-wise, I think we as a region have done very well. And the second thing, I think the focus is, Andy said, special needs. We don't just shy away from, okay, this is an area, I don't know what we want to do, we just embrace it, and they want to do something. So for example, John said, in particular, I'm so impressed, for example, our Black kids and our Latino kids are distancing themselves quite a bit as compared to the state, same kids.
The state averages.
Same kids. But we still have a way to go to close the gap with Asians and white kids. But that's really, and low income also the same way. So we are focusing on the right things, and we are not afraid of saying, okay, this is something we need to get better. And that's what I really give credit to a lot of our staff and all of the staff and leadership. Really say, well, this is something we want to do next.
You all mentioned that special needs students were a particular concern in terms of what you needed to maybe focus on. Are there specific programs or plans on how to address that in any of your districts that you're going to be rolling out in the next school year?
I'll start. I think some of it is just a mindset. We want to really, and we are shifting, and it's people, when it's a human, so this kid is special needs, I don't think this person can do as well as this other kid. They all can do better. It's improvement, it's performance. I think that part, and really in a lot of areas, yes, there are special things we have to do with these kids and federal requirements and everything else, but we are trying to move away from that these kids need to be pulled out and sit in a separate classroom or something. We are trying to sort of work with them, and when special help is needed, we do. But I think once you put really some of the goals we have as a system on every principal's desk and our own desks and say, okay, we need to see this kind of improvement in special needs. So this puts urgency and then create the environment in every school to do the right thing for these kids.
How is Tumwater addressing that issue?
Well, I think in all 4 school districts, we're well down the road with interventions and supports kind of in a tiered model. We often used to refer to that as RTI. Now they're changing the acronyms for that. But basically it's making sure you know who the kids are that aren't quite there yet, given whatever subject area you're looking at, and more specifically, what are the particular things they're struggling with, and then designing an intervention system that successfully and effectively addresses those needs. If that's done well, what you end up seeing are fewer kids qualifying for special education, and we've seen that in Tumwater. When I was in North Thurston, we were seeing that same trend, and I'm going to guess that's true in Olympia and Yelm. Now, all that said, what I would tell you is an opportunity and a challenge I think we all face, because I hear this from teachers and principals, is among the special needs are some social emotional needs and mental health needs. And just like the McCleary case in education, there are lawsuits against the state, for mental health services for our state that really mean there are unmet needs out in our communities. And we're seeing that in kindergarten with some of the challenges our teachers are facing. And so rather than just do a good job of identifying that problem, one thing we're putting on our radar this year is how can we partner with community organizations that might be able to help us connect families and kids to some of those services we don't provide, so that they're more ready to learn when they come to school. And so that's a project with our community outreach this year.
Right. Andy, how's Yelm handling that?
John hit on a really big point. As you look harder at your special needs population, you uncover more needs. It's like anything that you do. If you start to paint a room in your house, then you find that the next room needs to be painted too. So it kind of snowballs, and you really have to take a hard look at your program. Raj talked about a push-in model is what he was talking about. So it used to be special ed students were brought out of the class, taught in the self-contained room, and now you're seeing a transition where they go get the core instruction, and then you're trying to double dip, and these tiered interventions are very important, is how we work. I think we're all in that thing. Early intervention is going to be huge. One of the things that I think that we are all struggling with, we can deal with learning disabilities and some of those things, but there are mental health issues that our teachers are not equipped to handle, and really our school systems aren't. And that is becoming more as we identify those. Those are the challenges for us, not only for the safety of those students, but other students and staff. And so, as we continue to go down this pathway, I think this is going to be a critical piece. And so I think it's just one part. We look at all the students, the 4 corners of our school. You have to embrace all. You said that very nicely. We embrace all our students. And this is one area that I think is a challenge for us, not only at the district level, but at the state level also, and service level and on the social side of how do we provide for these people. So I think in Yelm, we have the Birth to 3. We've been very active. We're continuing to do that. I will tell you that special ed teachers, finding people to teach these very fragile and students that need very differentiated programs, it is a challenge to find people that want to go into that line of work. And all of us struggle to find that too. So that's another piece that we need to find great training and recruitment into that world too, because it has a huge blessing, but it is a lot of work. So.
Dick.
What my colleagues have shared is on target, so I don't want to spend much more time on that. I would say two things that we're thinking about in terms of our special needs population. One, and I don't want to paint this with too broad of a brush, but we've looked at the data, not just of special ed students, but special ed students coming from one parent family, and very few of those students met standard in our district. And there's not a support team. Often these kids are involved in mental health issues or other challenges, and oftentimes they're in single parent families. It's a tremendous burden. And if you peel that special ed student not meeting standard back a little bit more, the single parent students really struggle, even to a greater degree. The other piece that we're looking at is materials. Lots of students struggle with the materials that are before them, and there are many students who have IEPs who conceptually really understand what's happening. The problem is a lot of the curricular materials are written in one way for all students, and we're starting to think about different ways that we can teach the same content, the conceptual content, so kids can be engaged in classroom conversations and collaborating with their fellow students and understanding those big pictures, because the big picture things are really what we want kids to know. Of course, we want them to know their times tables and those types of things, but we want them to really know the big concepts. So we're starting to look at materials that we can use simultaneously with our special needs students as well as our regular ed students, where the content is the same, so they can engage in the dialogue. It's really important.
That's great. I know when I went to an elementary school that had the only class for deaf children in a 60-mile radius, and the children, and of course back then in the 60s, it was a very separated kind of segregated kind of scenario, but there were several children who were in the classroom because they had good speaking ability. And it made such a huge difference socially, I think, as I look back on it, to have the experience with a child who had a different kind of need for the rest of us in our class, because we all had an experience with a person who was not like us, who had something different about them, but learned how to relate to them in a way that was friendly and cordial and social. And so I can imagine that is a big part of trying to keep special needs students engaged in the academic conversation also.
Yeah, and if I could share one very brief personal story. When I was an elementary principal in the Highline School District, I went to my school, and we were building a new addition. And I won't use the same name, I'll use the same first name, Bruiser Johnson. I had gone to elementary school with. And back in the day, you didn't really have that kind of designation for a student. Well, I can hardly build a model airplane following directions. The person in charge of building that school, Bruiser Johnson. So we know that these students have huge capabilities and a huge upside. It's making sure that we're making the connections for them so they can find their way in the world.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. So let's transition a little bit to the talk of funding. We talk about school funding all the time, and it is somewhat of a repetitive record we have. I know that you all have some several of you have big construction projects going on and bonds and levies coming up, but I do want to take just a moment to talk about, what the crystal ball looks like relative to state funding. We know that in September, the Supreme Court found the state in contempt, which I find kind of an amazing legal procedure, and a $100,000 a day fine being issued because the McCleary standard has not been met yet for fully funding education. And, I'm wondering, are we at a point where we just throw up our hands and say, what the heck?
We can't.
Yeah.
We can't throw up our hands. Our hope is, I don't know anything more than what we read and see what's happening. But I do believe the performance our state has shown already, K-12, being number 40, 41 in the country.
On funding.
On funding,
right.
and performing at a much higher level, I always look at it, say, okay, what if we were funded a little better or middle of the road or country, sort of funding? It has to it needs to happen. But I think one of the concerns we all have is, I know my colleagues will share the same, that there is some discussion that they'll move the local levy, which, by the way, has become part of the basic education for quite some time, as has been increasing.
And was never intended
to be.
Right.
And so if they move that money to the state level, and the community kind of feels, okay, now state is funding and we don't need to worry about it. And so it's the same money which we're using. So they need to create additional resources than just that. But also, if they go that route, then explaining to our community if there is a small amount left still for local needs, how do we explain that? Now, tying it back to our bonds and levies, as you said, this will be again a challenge. I believe we are all on the same 4-year levy coming up in February. Then people might have in their, state already did something, right. and why they're asking for more money. So it's a challenge. But crystal ball, we don't know exactly what people are going to do.
You never know what's. Do any of you have anything you want to share on your perspectives or your?
One thing I think it's really, when we talk about levies, those are replacement levies that we're going to do. So those are funds that we are counting on in our school, and so the state has not made up those funds. And I'll just clearly say that for every district. And in our district, we're still about 18% of our basic ed funds come from the levy. So without those, if you take 18 cents off every dollar, we will struggle. So, and then people say, well, what program? That is dispersed across our district. You can't really define. It's very hard to pull it out and to see what would be in that situation. So I think that, I want to go back. I think the McCleary decision is impactful. It's great. I think the legislature has done some things. We've talked about all-day kindergarten and some of those things that are helping to move that way. I think the concern for all of us, and people need to understand as they go down the road, is that there's still no plan. And 2018 is the magic year. But there is no plan to fully fund education yet. We don't know what that looks like. And so we have to go out with assumptions that we still have to take care of our stakeholders, our students, which is our jobs. We are destined, this is why we're here, is to make sure that we take care of our students, staff, and our community and our stakeholders so that we have a better success rate and that they can go on to be career and college ready as they leave our things. So these levies are still highly impactful for us, and the loss of those at this point in time would be catastrophic across districts. So.
Yeah, and I would just add, it's not just a full funding issue, it's the funding mechanism and structure that currently exists. And we just talked about all-day kindergarten funding and how great it is to have all-day kindergarten. That will cost us all money because they're not yet fully funding schools. And in addition, if you read the headlines when the legislature finished their work, it says new money for education. Here's the story they don't tell, that they also raised the pension rates because our pension fund is not solvent unless they do something about it. And so in Tumwater, we have to spend $1.3 million more this year for the same number of employees, but that doesn't seem to make the headlines. In addition, they did finally offer a cost of living increase for staff. And in Tumwater, all of our agreements with staff say we'll flow that through. Well, if you're not funding everybody, we're estimating right now that's another $300,000. So right out of the chute, in our budget planning, we had to plan for $1.6 million to buy nothing new, just to pay the bills. And so these are the things, Raj talked about educating, these are the things we really have to educate not only our community about, but our own staff about, who also expect in the collective bargaining process to be taken care of in a fair and equitable way.
And education, the funding for education, we've had these conversations so many times. It's very complex. It's very difficult, I think, for the average citizen who has to check a box, yes or no, to understand what this levy does and where does the other money come, and so because you look like you wanted to jump in there, so.
I think you've said part of what I wanted to say. I think it's a tremendously complex problem. And I'm not a state legislator. I'm a school superintendent. I know what I know. There are probably things that I need to learn as well. But if I intend to be a legislator, I have to help solve this problem. And I don't have the exact solution, but I think part of our process as a democracy, this is a common good. This is something that's good for everyone, a strong public education system for many, many reasons. And if I'm a legislator, that's my responsibility to figure that out. And there are multiple constituencies. I get that. I'm not a legislator. I'm not suggesting a solution, but if that's what your role is and you view yourself as a leader in this state, then you need to come to grips with this problem in a very real way in a short time.
Go ahead,
And I
Rob.
think, Deborah, I just want to add what has been said already. I think the major problem looming ahead is shortage of teachers. So, you know, during this discussion, strike up in Seattle area and others, you know, to live in Seattle now, I feel for those teachers, and anywhere, to be honest. And so I think there might be a trend going on nationally. Young people don't want to go into education because of the money, and you know, we expect high performance, which is great.
Right.
But at the same time, when the salary is not keeping up with other fields where they can go. So I think, so tied with this whole funding system, they need to, it's part of their
Right.
work. They need to look at salaries of teachers and so that we can attract some of the best to go into education, because that is really, it's going to happen over a period of time, but it's going to be really difficult. Now what John said already, I think that for us, the same numbers he talked about, that's about $4 million to take care of the whole retirement, you know, this pension funds, and also at the same time making sure that we can't say we are not going to give you 3%.
Right.
We need to pay for everybody. So how systematically, in a complex way, the basic education, basic sports system has been moved to the local areas, and then people like us, superintendents and the boards, are the ones, and sometimes teachers and others say, pay us this, this is what we expect. And they're right, but it's not, it's the responsibility of the state.
Right, right. It's not, you know, you often hear people say education isn't, it's a calling, you know, it's not about the paycheck. Well, it is, it has to be. I was a teacher for a while, and, you know, so I do have some empathy for all the hours that teachers
Yep.
work. I mean, Andy, you were talking about, you know, as the superintendent, helping to park the cars at the football game. You know, it's like everybody does extra duty in an educational community, and you know, fair compensation is fair compensation. That's pretty much what it boils down to. So I do want to take, we have about 10 minutes left. I do want to take just a couple of minutes to talk about school safety in the light of what has happened recently down in Oregon. It's very scary to think about the possibility of something, and we had an incident in our district in Raj last year that was thankfully
Yes.
resolved without any injuries. So I can only imagine that, you know, that add one more thing to not only your planning, but also to your budget in how are you addressing, you know, upgrades in security or safety or changes, or, you know, what's going on in your district. So John, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I also want to share that beyond Tumwater, this is another example of how we collaborate really well. Recently, we were at the Olympia Rotary Club, and three of us anyway were sharing what we're all doing respectively, because this is our top priority. You have to have a safe school environment and do as much as you can to both prevent and then be prepared to respond to a situation like this. And while you never want this to happen in your backyard, because it did, it really stepped up our vigilance and our urgency around this across the region, not just in these districts. So in Tumwater, what I can tell you is the bond that our community passed included a number of supports and funding for things like cameras, increased security in the design of new facilities or modernization projects. And again, this is not unique to Tumwater. This is going on in each district. And then we're looking at protocols around what do you do when you see something or hear something, and how do we make it safe and comfortable for kids to say something. So when I talked about relationship building, that's part of the reason. We want kids to feel okay about that. We're looking at things like student crime stoppers, where if a kid isn't comfortable identifying themselves, but they heard or saw something, they've got
have a way to
that
present
avenue.
that.
And then I know in Olympia they had a guest come in and an expert come in and actually address the kids, and I'm sure Dick will speak to that, but that's another example of some things our school resource officer, for example, has been doing for years in classrooms. Chuck Liska, fantastic guy, and he has great relationships with kids. So a number of things are going on both in our facility planning with secure entries, cameras that we didn't have before, but also in creating a culture where we make it safe for our kids to say something and let us know, so we can hopefully prevent anything really awful like that from happening. And in my closing story, I've got a related piece where we're talking about bullying and harassment, and that often is in these mass shooting events what you'll find the person engaged in that points to as part of the reason they may have done it. And so I think it's another piece of the solution that we have to be vigilant about addressing that proactively. So I'm excited to share a little piece of a story from a classroom about that.
Andy, any changes for
We're
you?
kind of in the same boat. We have some very old buildings out there, you know, and we have an upcoming bond to replace buildings. Hopefully that will pass this year with our growth, is, you know, getting state assistance funds there. In that bond also is $1 million set aside for security features. Beyond that, though, within the district, full-time SRO, increase our fencing, lighting, cameras, communication. We've been a Crime Stopper, youth Crime Stopper now, I think for at least 6 or 7 years. We've already utilized that, which has been a very valuable tool where students feel like they can make a call in, you know, they don't have to say their name. And then if the tip comes through, they can actually get a reward back on that, and it's all done so nobody knows. So that's been a positive piece out in Yelm. I think the one thing is that continual vigil about what is happening. We put counselors in every building now. Elementaries too have full-time counselors which help with that. Groups, just looking at that, and just a more awareness. I think that, you know, everybody believes it's going to happen somewhere else, and we have to assume. And it's unfortunate in our worlds now, we make an assumption it could happen in ours. The other things that I think that we look at is, even away from the classroom, we've all got, you know, cameras on our buses now, you know, trying to look at bus safety, and even to the extent that we're doing that. So this is an area that we're going to continue to get better. Some of our structures don't allow us to do some of the things that we really need to do to protect people, just because schools were built in open concept. There may not be doors and things like that. So those are all things that we're going to get better at. And but it is a huge focus.
Dick?
John had mentioned that we brought Jesus Villahermosa in to speak with our students, and it was a bit of a risk because it was a pretty tough conversation. But we really took to heart his message earlier in the summer that we're looking at this through the eyes of school people on how to create safety for students. And he maintains that that's the wrong lens. And so we brought him in to speak with our middle school students and our high school students. The response back was tremendous. High school students said, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me, and in terms of a presentation in an assembly. And the most heinous acts are the ones that we respond to. And the data on those events, that close to 85% of those events, I'm talking the shootings in public schools and universities, or 85%, someone knew, other people knew this was going to happen. It had been shared. And so what he talked about with our students is, your role in this is critical. We can practice lockdowns, we can practice after the events, but these things happen before first responders get there. Not every school is going to have a Brady Olson in it to tackle an individual. So we're working really hard with our students around, you have a critical role in this. This is what this looks like. We held a public meeting with parents last week, same presentation. Not as big a crowd as we hoped. There are about 200 people there. And we see these things happening across our country, and we're shocked. and the public is shocked, and we all feel very badly about it, and then it's 3 or 4 days later, it seems like we go back to business as usual, and we're just saying we cannot do that. We just can't do this, and we want our kids to play a role in helping to make the school safe. I'd go on a long time on this. I'm pretty passionate about it, but that's our big focus right now.
Okay, Raj.
And I just want to start by saying really creating a culture in our schools where we really support every child. So this social emotional well-being and positive behavior work we have been doing for quite some time is really, really paying off in a lot of good ways. And the other part we really started last year was compassionate school system. And this is also, now we have partnered with City of Lacey, and they have also adopted that. So our hope is that we can reach out to the community in a way that nobody feels that they are kind of alone and they are being harassed, and so those kind of things are going on. But the other part I want to quickly say is that a lot of the structural and cameras and everything else, the training, as you know, as Dick said and John said, we want to do more of those, really face-to-face with kids and really bring people like the guy you talk about. 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, Mr. Bash was the one who was really on our system side. We organized a gathering, safety summit, after the Sandy Hook. And he led the work, and all of us were participating. And I think that triggered a lot of things in our systems, and we started doing some of that stuff. And I really believe that collectively, if we keep on talking and educating our community, but mental health keeps on coming back. We need to, as a society, we need to focus on that. And we need to do whatever we can do within our systems. And if you have a minute, I just want to say we have a new middle school opening in fall. It will be Salish Middle School. And so pretty much all Native American names for our middle schools. And that means it triggered some boundary changes. So we had a committee of 25 people, and they've been working for the last 4 or 5 months, and they're coming close to, we had a large gathering of people, 3 different meetings, maybe 300-400 people attended. So we are going to shift some of the, of course, students and people. It's always hard.
Right.
I just want to say to the community that we'll do the right thing for every school, but it's a good thing for us overall as a system, because it'll be much more efficient to have kind of balance in all schools.
Okay. We are dreadfully close to being out of time, and I'd love to include our little back to school story moments. So I'm going to give each of you like 15 seconds to say you had something you wanted to start with, so go for it.
All right, real quick. Second grade classroom, teacher hands out pink paper hearts and asks the kids, how do you feel when somebody calls you a name? They crumple the heart.
Right.
And anyway, she gives them 10 minutes to see if they can get the wrinkles out of the heart. Of course they can't.
Right.
And the message is,
Cool.
before you speak, think and be smart. It's hard to fix a wrinkled heart.
That's a
And
very...
this is a daily reminder.
There we go.
And all their names are on a Band-Aid.
So cool.
I was going to say, how can you follow up with that? Okay,
We'll
so
let John, he just spoke for all of us. That was awesome.
I said it.
it's hard to fix a wrinkled
know.
heart. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, I will give you all an opportunity to share some special stories at our next meeting of the Roundtable, but I know the guys in the control room are probably going crazy because we're out of time. So if you are the parent of a preschool child, please read with your child 20 minutes every day. It's one of the best things you can do to get them ready for learning. And while you're at it, throw in some counting and number games to get them interested in math. If you're the parent of a school-age child, please get involved with your child's education. There are many ways you can volunteer. Talk to your child's teacher or principal, or go to their website to see what opportunities are available. For all of us here at the Roundtable, it's my pleasure to join these gentlemen once again. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in a couple of months.